Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Lawrence Lepus. You can call me Larry, whatever, doesn't matter. And I'm going to show you an idea of mine and my favorite variation of the Sicilian Defense Alapin Variation, also known as C3 Sicilian and also known as one of the anti-Sicilians. Now, I'm going to start off with white starts off with pawn to e4, then black replies with pawn to c5. Now, white replies with c3. It's called the anti-Sicilian because it's usually this knight going over here, or like maybe over here next instead of pushing c3, whatever. Okay, now there are many different ideas. This is just one line and a certain idea in one line. All right, now knight to f6. Because it's attacking the e4 pawn. Now, you push e5, knight, then the knight goes to d5. Now, the idea here is to attack this knight because now you get along this diagonal here, right up there. Now, as the knight retreats to b6, it's attacking the bishop on c4. Now, white moves it back here white moves the bishop back to b3. Which gets this pawn to move up here. It's the next move. It's attacking the bishop on b3. So now, he moves the bishop back to c2. Now, which allows black to move this knight up here. It develops a piece to c6, and is attacking the pawn on e5. So now, white develops a piece, his knight, his kingside knight, because the queenside is not exactly developed yet, because there's one of the disadvantages of the c3 Sicilian. The queen side takes a little while to get developed. Anyway, so now black replies by putting the queen to c7 because now it's attacking the pawn by the c6 knight and the c7 queen. So now, usually you would go right here, queen e2. It's to defend the pawn on e4. But the idea of mine is to castle first. Basically, just gambiting that pawn right there on e5. Now, if black takes, and white takes again, and black takes, black is up a pawn. Because now the queen's on the e5, the queen's on the central square, but here comes the counterplay. The rook moves over to e1, attacking the queen on the e5 square. e1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So now let's say the queen moves back to c7. Seems like a nice square. It can move anywhere. h5, g5. It can even move to f6. But there's now. The idea here is get good compensation for the pieces. Now, you move d4. Now, what that d4 move does is it gives this bishop a nice scope all the way up here. This bishop has a nice scope. This queen has a nice scope on the diagonal. A rook, you can do a rook lift like e3 or e4. And you could take on passant, but I don't think that's a good idea. Because if you take on passant here, that's transformed passing. You go here, and now look what you got. A nice batter in the diagonal. You can move the knight out here, whatever. So my recommendation is to not take the pawn. You can go over here, whatever. Let's say he moves over here to help block in this position. Granted, it is a backwards pawn. So, one of the ideas is to move the rook up here to e3. Because now, the rook can move along anywhere along this rank, except for e3 because d3 because pawn takes. And now, and now you can at least some fun. Yeah, let me see now. All right, now let's say he goes g6. You put the queen like here. Let's say he moves g6 to fianchetto the bishop to g7 here. You move your queen right to e1 or to e2. The reason why, because, alright, now let's say e1, he goes bishop e2. Now he can't castle. He must move this pawn up before he can castle. Let me see now. Let me see now. Basically, the rook can move back here if it wants. If it wants, because if black castles, then the rook takes e7 here. Not exactly the best idea to do, but it's very, very good. Now, one of the reasons for pushing the rook back to e2 is to bring the bishop over here to attack bring the bishop to g5 to attack the e7 square. Now if e5, d takes e5, bishop takes, rook takes, check, and bam. Or you could just do this, because pawn's pinned to the king on the e8 square. Now if he castles, just bishop takes and you get the material back, and white is okay. So now, if white goes to e6, all of his all of his pieces, like the dark squares, are kind of weak. So he must keep that bishop. So now you start here. Here, let me focus on that. Sorry. Now you start on here and you push the bishop right here, because the idea is to push the bishop to a4 and b3, and back up to e5. So if he castles, I mean, and there's so many things you can do. You could push the knight over here. You could push the bishop to h4. Well, that about wraps it up. If you feel free to give this video a thumbs up and tell me what you think. Leave a comment in below. Tell me a different line you want to go over, and have yourself a good